Okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning and joining us today in this very important session on paraphrasing, synthesis, and referencing tips and strategies. Very important topic for undergrads and postgraduates as well. So, thank you so much, Gemma and Joseph, for joining us today, for making the time, for dedicating your time and effort to support our students in this really tricky and difficult time. It's evening time in Australia now, but Gemma and Joseph decided to spend some time and talk to our students. So we really appreciate this because this makes a difference, really makes a difference in our students' experience and learning journey. So we really appreciate it, Joseph and Gemma. We look forward to listening to your session. Guys, as I said in the beginning, we encourage you to interact with the speakers. Either you can send your questions in the chat box or comments as well. Or unmute, raise your hand and unmute and speak to us. We would love to make it a conversational style. We would love to make it informal discussion, and that's what we always do. So, Joseph, Gemma, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to the session, and over to you.
Gemma, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello everyone. My name's Gemma O'Donoghue, and it's so lovely to be with you here today or tonight, depending what time zone you're in. Um, my background is in English language teaching, applied linguistics, TESOL. So I am really pleased to be with other teachers, especially language teachers. Um, that's a little bit about me. Joseph and I are both from the University of Technology in Sydney. Joseph, I hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gemma. So Gemma and I, we are part of the academic language and learning team at our university. So what we do is we work with academics in the faculty to embed communication in the curriculum. And as Gemma mentioned, we both come from education background and also in applied linguistics. My research interest is in racism and assessment. So I'm most happy to talk to any of you who are interested in applied linguistics on issues related to assessments, on issues related to racism. Um, so without further ado, let's commence tonight's or this afternoon session on paraphrasing, synthesis, and referencing. So we have aimed to um, have a 60-minute delivery on paraphrasing, synthesis, and referencing. So Gemma will be delivering the first half on paraphrasing and synthesis, and I will then take over in the second half on referencing. Now, as Ahmed I mentioned earlier, we want this to be as relaxed and as interactive as possible. And this is us, wanting to share what we have learned with you. And hopefully, this is relevant and applicable to you in your studies. Please feel free at any point in time to stop us if you have any questions, if you need any clarification. You can either post any questions or comments in the chat, or if you're brave enough, feel free to unmute yourself and ask us your questions, and we will endeavor to address any concerns that you may have. And we, of course, we don't claim to have all the answers. If we are able to address your concerns, great. If not, we will take down your questions and then get back to you at some point in time through Ahmed. Um, Now, in your assessments, You might be asked for your opinion on something, or you might be asked whether you agree or disagree with something. And you might think, yep, these are my views, or I agree or disagree with this or that. But very often, our ideas and opinions are hardly original because we are influenced by what we see, what we watch, what we read, what we have heard, and from our interactions with other people. And you might think that you have an original idea that no one else has thought of, but more than likely, other people have written about it. So unless it is a piece of original study conducted by you, you do need to do some research and reading and include some of these readings in your writing to prove that you are right, that your arguments are sound and credible. And this is where paraphrasing, synthesis, and referencing come in. Gemma?
So in the workshop today, as Joseph mentioned, we're going to talk about academic integrity. I'm going to talk to you for about 25 minutes about paraphrasing and synthesizing. And when I say talk, I really do encourage it to be a conversation. Please do feel free to put your comments in the chat or to speak up. Or if you prefer to reflect quietly, that's also fine. And then Joseph will be talking about referencing. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have time for questions and discussion. So let's start by thinking about what we mean by these three terms: paraphrasing, synthesizing, and referencing. And again, if you have any questions about this, please do put it in the chat. So paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is when we're using the ideas and research of other people in our own work, and we need to put it into our own words. So for example, if you have to write an essay and you need to read a couple of different texts, and then you need to read a text, think about what the ideas are, make notes, and then put those ideas and notes in your own words into your writing. That's a sample of paraphrasing, and a very big part of your academic work, and a very challenging part. I think paraphrasing and synthesizing are could be very, very challenging things to do. So that's paraphrasing. Synthesizing, which we'll be touching on a little bit in this workshop, is when we may have read or watched different different things or read different articles, and we've identified ideas and perspectives, and then we're trying to pull all of them in to one kind of coherent argument or idea. So we're synthesizing our learning and our reading into one idea. So it's pulling it all in together. And then referencing is when we demonstrate where you have used ideas and information that's created by another person. So this is often, you may think about APA referencing style, where we actually think about, okay, what is the system I need to include in my writing or my presentation that actually shows the reader where I've got this information from? And this is referencing, and I believe you use APA 7th referencing style. We use the same style too. So that hopefully gives you a good understanding of they're the three terms that we'll be talking about today. Maybe terms that are very familiar with you, but always nice to have a refresher. Now, as I said, paraphrasing can be difficult, can be challenging. So what I wanted to do before I sort of share strategies with you and some activities with you, is give you a moment to think about what are some of the issues you have or you've had when you're trying to paraphrase, and what are some strategies or tips you use when you're paraphrasing to help you do that. So what I'll do is I'll give you a moment, maybe a minute, to think about those questions. You are free to put up your hand and share some of the issues you have with paraphrasing or some of the strategies. Maybe you've got some great ideas of how you do paraphrasing. You can talk to us, or if you prefer, if you want to put your ideas, any issues or problems you're having with paraphrasing, or tips and strategies in the chat. And I'll give you a 30 seconds or a minute just to think about that and put any of your ideas in the chat. But you're also welcome to just reflect quietly on that yourself as well. So I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, thank you, Shahed, and I hope my pronunciation is right. My apologies if it's not. Who's made the comment, when I write something about topics that I don't have enough knowledge about, I research on Google internet pages and read what's there and get ideas from there. Okay, lovely, thank you. So Jude, my apologies again if I've got
Oh, it's
some.
perfectly right.
Oh, good, good. So, Jude,
Um,
what did you want to share with us?
so one issue that I face is when I want to paraphrase something, to convey the meaning accurately. Like,
Okay.
yeah, to paraphrase it, like the meaning to, you know. And then what I do, what strategies I do is that I sometimes is change the structure of the sentence, maybe from passive to active or something, and use
Yep.
synonyms.
Use synonyms. Was that one, so Jude?
Using synonyms.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So changing active to passive, thinking of other words.
Yeah.
Okay. There's some good strategies, definitely. And I like that, that issue around paraphrasing but not changing the meaning. Is definitely a really kind of common issue people have with paraphrasing, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I can see Joseph's responding to the chat. I'm just having a look at what replacing words means, keeping the length of paragraph, only focusing on vocab. Is not an easy task. No, it's definitely not an easy task. Paraphrasing, I agree. I've been doing it for many, many years and I still find it challenging. Um, Okay. We can come back to these comments later. But listen, I will share some suggestions with you. But also it's a great opportunity to listen to each other and learn from each other too, because people always have new ideas that are useful. But so here's my kind of advice, strategy, and tips. Um, so overall, one of my main things would be is when you're trying to paraphrase something, whether that's you're reading a sentence, you're reading a paragraph, or a longer piece of text, what's really important is to try to capture the meaning. Now, that may seem really obvious, but I think often what students can do is they can get very caught on trying to understand every word and maybe translate every word or find a synonym for every word. What I would suggest is reading something and then thinking, well, what is the overall meaning here? Um, and that may involve kind of going back and having to read it a couple of times. That may involve, if you have the opportunity, talking to a peer, a friend or a tutor about what the meaning of the text is, but collecting that meaning and not just thinking about what the vocabulary means, but what are the main ideas you can pull out. Then there's different kind of strategies for actually sort of doing the paraphrasing and the note taking. Some of those would be what are the key ideas you want to note down? So especially if you've got an idea in your head of what information you want, that can help you to direct what kind of ideas you want to note down. Another thing is to use your own words. And so, Jude, I think you were talking about trying to find synonyms. That's a really useful kind of thing to do. But reading the text, maybe looking away, and then thinking, how can I put this into my own words? Maybe make the words brief. It doesn't have to be a full sentence at this stage when you're paraphrasing. But seeing if you can kind of capture that meaning in your own words. Another way of doing this, because sometimes it's very hard to kind of read something and use your own words and find the right words or without changing the meaning. Another thing you might do is, can you use like a picture or a drawing or a map or a diagram to help you capture the meaning of what you're reading? You may also want to like talk out loud about what that is and possibly record yourself. There's lots of different ways you can think about of trying to get that meaning. Um, Another thing you can do is kind of think about, if you're reading a paragraph or a longer section, what's the relationship between the ideas in the paragraph? Are they contrasting ideas? Are they adding ideas? And that can kind of help you sometimes make connections between meaning. And we're going to have a look at a few examples in a moment, which I hope help you put some of this into practice. When you've done your paraphrasing, it's always a good idea to sort of go back to the text, check that you have the correct meaning. Possibly it's very easy to misinterpret or change meaning when you're doing your paraphrase. So going back to the text, checking your meaning. Again, if you can check with a peer or a tutor, that would be great. So checking your meaning. And then last of all, when you're doing your paraphrasing, make sure you make note of the actual text that you've been looking at, because sometimes you can make all these notes and then you go back to look at them afterwards and you think, oh, what was I reading? Okay, so don't do that. We'll save you time. Make sure you remember what the actual text was. They are some tips and strategies. There may be more in the chat, which we can have a look at later. But what I want to do now is to give you some practice and a bit of an activity to do to help us kind of think about, well, how can we put some of these ideas that I've suggested or your peers have suggested into practice? So I'm going to give you this scenario. I want you to imagine that you have to write an essay, which is, what are some of the key considerations for English language teachers to address in 2025? I should say that's second language teachers as well. And you can think, okay, your tutor has given you 2 texts to read, and we are going to look at 2 paragraphs from 2 different readings that you can see up there on the screen. Now, the first one, this is a paragraph. This is obviously, there's lots of paragraphs on this, but I've pulled out this paragraph from this book, and I'm going to give you a moment to read through it and then make some notes, some paraphrase some of the ideas in this paragraph. So, for example, thinking about some of those techniques, reading through, think about the general meaning. Maybe you don't understand every single thing. Maybe that's not important. What's the general meaning? You may want to think about, how can you put some of those meanings in your own words? You may think if there's a way to kind of capture that visually. Are there pictures or a diagram? There's something that makes sense to you that helps you capture that meaning. We're doing this very quickly, so I'm going to give you a minute or two to read through, and then I'm going to share with you my attempts to paraphrase this. but I'll give you a minute to read through and see if you can have a quick go at paraphrasing this paragraph yourself. I'll give you about 2 minutes. I realize that's not a long time, but I'll try give you 2 minutes there. Okay, I'm gonna move on. I hope you've had a bit of a chance to maybe have like maybe 1 or 2 ideas about how you'd paraphrase that. Now I'm going to talk you through how I did this. You may have other ideas, but I had a look at the paragraph, I read through, and I highlighted initially things that I found to be kind of the main ideas and things thinking about that essay question that I thought would be useful. You'll find in the yellow, if you can see the yellow, okay, these are the main ideas I highlighted, but I also have highlighted here the green to kind of show you what's happening between the relationship between the ideas in that sentence. So you've got these these ideas of change in education, disruption, changing traditional practice in education, but also that technology may not actually change teaching practices that need to change. And with that, the green, you see the one on one hand and on the other hand. So what we know from here is there's a relationship here where you get contrasting opinions. So when I've gone to paraphrase this is what I have come up with. So I've got big changes in education with lots of exclamation marks. So I've got the idea that it's a big, big change. I've put it in bold. And I've then gone digital and online education. And to try to capture that different relationship, I've got one arrow up here saying it will pose significant changes. And then I've got however, again in bold with an exclamation. And then I've got current teaching practices, including outdated teaching practices not changed. So you can see here, I've used my own words, I've used synonyms, I have used diagrams to try to capture that meaning. And then I would go back and read through and think, okay, is there anything that I've missed here? Is there anything that I need to change? Okay. I'll keep going because I'm mindful of time and I can talk too much, so I'll move on. I want to do the same exercise again. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to read through this paragraph. This paragraph is looking at global Englishes. an idea that you might be familiar with, but just the idea that English is a global language and there's lots of different varieties of English. I'll give you a moment to read through, again, thinking about what would be the main ideas that you might identify. How might you paraphrase that really briefly using your own words, pictures, diagrams, or any other strategy that you have in place. So I'll give you a moment or two to read through that, have a go, and I hope I'm not going too fast. Okay, I hope you've had some time to read and maybe think about how you might paraphrase that paragraph. Again, when I did this, and you may have done something different, I've highlighted, I read through and I highlight what I think is going to be the most important. A lot of people highlight and then stop. I think you need to, the highlighting is a good place to kind of start, but you need to kind of move on and do the paraphrasing as well. Again, here I've highlighted in yellow the kind of key ideas that I think are going to be useful for me to paraphrase and that I might use in the essay. But again, here I've also highlighted in green the phrases that help to organize those ideas. So you've got nowadays, in light of this development, and consequently. I've highlighted them just to remind me of how the ideas are working in this paragraph and how in each sentence they're building an argument. So we saw in the last paragraph there was a contrasting organization, and here I think it's more of an additional kind of building of an argument towards using global Englishes. So again, from here, my paraphrasing you can see on the side. You may have done a better job than me here. But I've got 2024 English and I've got a picture here. So I'm like, okay, so of there's the world and everyone around the world is speaking English. Okay. I've got I forget what you call it, the greater than arrow to say there's more L2 speakers than L1. I've actually kept the language quite similar, because language learning and TESOL are actually like they're the names of things. And when you've actually got the names of subjects or fields or proper nouns, they're not off, sometimes that will stay the same. So you don't have to paraphrase everything. Sometimes those key terms, it would be important to keep the same. And I've also got global Englishes. And I've included these arrows here to remind myself when I look at the notes that these are ideas that are connected, that are building on each other. Okay, now I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to move on to the next stage after paraphrasing, which is synthesizing. So synthesizing, we've looked at our articles, we've done our paraphrasing, and now we're trying to pull together all of our different notes and different learnings into one kind of coherent argument, and to kind of help us develop our own thoughts about something. So some general ideas around synthesizing, and again, if you have any, please put them in the chat and you can share them with each other. But identifying what are the main themes and topics. So important that when we're looking at our notes, we've got to focus in on what's most important. So what are the main topics and what are the main themes you're looking at? And you might think, well, where are the similarities between the different articles, and how does that help build an argument? And then where are some of the differences, and where are the unique differences that different people might make? And again, I encourage you, if you have any strategies or advice and tips on how you synthesize, how you bring all your ideas together when you're putting together an essay or presentation, please do so. What I thought I would do before I hand over to Joseph to talk about referencing is show you an example of, okay, well, here are the notes that we just made from the paraphrasing. And I would start to try to make connections between these things. So we can definitely see that in the current context, when we're thinking about challenges for English language teaching, that there's a lot of challenges, there's lots of things to be thinking about. And there's examples we could give of the challenges of online learning and what that's posing, and the challenges of some of our conceptualization around English. And to finish up, and I hope this is useful, here is an example of a paragraph that I have, or a couple of paragraphs I have put together to try to show how I've tried to synthesize the two articles. I've tried to think about answering that essay question, and I've pulled together some of those articles, and then I've also kind of summarized from my notes and written about each of the different, the online teaching and the global Englishes. I'll give you a moment to have a read through of that. You may look, and you may have, if you were doing this, you may come up with a different way, but this is my attempt to kind of look at my paraphrasing and pull together my synthesis and present that in a paragraph. I'll give you a moment to read through, and if anyone's got any comments, you can pop that in the chat, or we'll come back to questions at the end. But then,
sorry, Gemma, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I can see slide number 1 on the screen. Is that what you're...
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, no, wait a minute. Let me just see. You should be able to, what's happening here?
I assume if you minimize the file, then probably the screen will pop up with the slides.
Let me just see if I might just reshare.
That's a good idea, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I might have lost. So let me just go share.
Now we can see the slide that you were talking about, synthesizing.
Oh, can you? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see it in presenter view, or can you see it in?
No, just not in present view.
Okay, okay. All right. There might be
Maybe
some.
if you click from current slide, play from current slide, it would present from.
Let me just go here. Play
Yeah.
from. Okay. Can you see
Perfect.
synthesizing
Yeah.
advice? All
Yes.
right.
Perfect.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I hope I haven't had the wrong sides up. That's the example of my synthesis notes. I don't know if you saw that before. And that's my example of the paragraph and the synthesis. Is that clear now?
Yes, it is clear now.
I'm sorry about that.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Gemma.
All these years on Zoom and still. Please do let me know if my slides okay. I'll give you a moment to read through that. Any comments, I'll respond to in the chat. And then Joseph, whenever you want me to hand over to you.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments towards the end.
Okay, next slide, please, Gemma. Hi again, my name is Joseph for those who join us late. I've just taken over from Gemma and I will be focusing on referencing. Now, I do have to recognize the fact that referencing is not the most exciting topic. Nonetheless, it is an important topic. It's an important topic because all of us need to know how to do referencing in order to maintain our academic integrity. Now, this is going to be quite a dry topic, but I will try my best to make it as interesting as possible. Now, if at any point in time, if you don't understand anything that I'm talking about, feel free to stop me or post your questions in the chat. And then Gemma is going to help me monitor the chat. I'll be the first to admit I cannot multitask. I can only do one thing at a time. So when I'm presenting, I'm afraid I can't give my divided attention to the chat. So I'm going to have to rely on Gemma to stop me and to provide any clarification if necessary. So as I mentioned before, referencing is really important, is really critical when it comes to maintaining academic integrity. Now, what do we mean by academic integrity? Now, it is about being honest, it's about being responsible in your learning journey. Now, why is it important to maintain academic integrity? You may wonder. Now, an alternative is perhaps for you to imagine what it means to have no academic integrity. Now, imagine if I were training to be an engineer, or if I were training to be a doctor or teacher. I'm sure you would like to trust that I've received the best training, that I know my stuff, that I'm qualified to build a bridge as an engineer, that I'm qualified to treat you when you're unwell as a doctor. And as a teacher, I know the best practice to help my students achieve their full potential. And one way to show that you have academic integrity is your ability to express your understanding of what you have learned. And that's what Gemma was explaining to us in the last 30 minutes or so on how to express in your own words through paraphrasing a source or synthesizing from a number of sources. All right. So that's one way in which you can maintain your academic integrity by expressing your understanding in your own words from what you have researched, from what you have read. Another way to display your academic integrity is through referencing, and that's what we are going to talk about. So I would like to turn your attention to what referencing is, what we need to reference, and how to reference in your writing. Next slide, please, Gemma. So when we talk about referencing or citation, so sometimes I might use citation interchangeably. They mean the same thing, all right? So when we talk about referencing or citation in academic writing, we are essentially talking about two things: in-text referencing and reference list. Now, in-text references are within the body of your writing, whether you're writing an essay or report or reflection. Now, this is where you show and include all the sources that you have consulted in the writing process. And these sources could be your textbooks or any other books and articles you have been referred to, or even websites and videos, etc. And a reference list appears at the end of your writing after the conclusion. This is where you compile a list of all the sources you have referred to in the body of your writing. So if you have 10 different sources in your essay or report, I would expect to see the same 10 references in your reference list. Nothing more, nothing less. All right, next slide, please. Now, there are many different ways to do referencing, just like there are many different paths to arrive at the same destination. Now, to maintain consistency, we tend to stick to a particular referencing style. Now, that depends on your discipline of study. In your context, you are expected to use APA 7, and you might know this already. APA stands for American Psychological Association, and it's the 7th edition you're expected to follow. Next slide, please. So why do we need to include references in our writing? As I mentioned at the beginning, most of our ideas are not our original ideas because we have been influenced by what we have read, what we have talked about with our peers, with our teachers, what we have watched, what we have consumed in the media. So we need to look for and include credible sources to back up our arguments. Now, your teacher will want to see that you have done your research and your readings and that you are able to synthesize them in a logical and convincing manner because you need to convince the reader and your teacher that you are right, that your argument is convincing. Now, we want to see that you have respected the people whose work you have referenced. And if we want to look up any of the sources you have included, your clear referencing will enable us to look them up very easily. So when do we reference? The next slide, please. Now, as long as you have used a source in any way, now whether you have quoted word for word from a source or whether you have expressed in your own words by paraphrasing or summarizing from one single source or synthesizing from a number of sources, you need to tell us exactly what these sources are, all right? By making sure that you provide all the necessary details. Now, somebody has, because I was just glancing at the chat, somebody was asking what's the difference between the 7th and the 8th edition. Now, there are different editions. Now, and each edition will come about some small changes or some improvement from the previous edition. Now, normally, they bring out a new edition in order to make anything clearer, all right, for students. So if there's anything that's unclear or confusing in the previous edition, then they want to add more information to add more clarification, more clarity to the current edition. So that's why you have the various editions when it comes to referencing style. All right. So as I mentioned, when do we reference? As long as you have used a source in any way, whether it's a direct quotation and that's word for word from a source, or whether you have paraphrased or summarized, or whether you have synthesized from a number of sources. Next slide, please. So how do I reference? As I mentioned, we use APA 7th. Now, there are two elements when we talk about referencing. Now, the in-text referencing, which is about referring to all your sources within your writing, and the reference list, which is a compilation of all the sources at the end of your writing. Now, with in-text referencing, all you need to remember is to include the author's last name and the year of publication. That's all you need to remember. Last name and year of publication. Now, for instance, my name is Joseph Yeo. Joseph is my first name and Yeo is my last name. Now, if you were to cite my most recent article published this year, 2025, it would be Yeo 2025. And if you were to cite Gemma's article from this year, it would be O'Donoghue 2025. You don't care about my first name. You don't care about Gemma's first name. It is only the last name and the year of publication. All right. So these are the only two elements you need to include when it comes to in-text referencing. So far, very easy, very straightforward. Now it becomes a little bit muddier and a little bit more complicated when we talk about information prominent and author prominent, as well as primary and secondary citation. But I'm going to talk about these with examples over the next few slides. So let me address that later. Now, next, the reference list. Now, as I mentioned before, the reference list must contain the exact number of references you have included in the body of your writing. So if you have included 15 sources in your essay or report or reflection, then I expect to see the same 15 references in your reference list, and you will arrange them in alphabetical order from A to Z. And over the next few slides, again, as I go through the different examples, I will show you how to do that in your reference list. And at the end, I will show you a sample reference list, all right, to show you exactly what to do. The next slide, please. Now, I am going to give you 30 seconds to a minute to have a quick read of this short paragraph. Now, I don't expect you to understand this short paragraph in the next 30 seconds or 1 minute. I just wanted you to be able to compare and contrast the two sentences in this short paragraph. Now, I will make this slide deck available. So I will send this to Ahmed at the end of our presentation so that he can share this slide deck with all of you together with a recording. And also at the end of this slide deck, I have a slide with hyperlinks to a number of online references. These are free sources that anyone can access, all right? Including a PDF of the APA 7th edition provided by my university's library, and that's freely accessible. And I have also included a number of online resources on paraphrasing, on how to express your understanding in your own words effectively, and also on synthesis. Okay. So I believe I've given you enough time to have a quick read of this short paragraph. Now, next slide, please. I would like you to have a closer look at the two sentences. Now, the first sentence, I've colored it blue, and the second sentence, I've colored it red. Now, in the first sentence in blue, this is an example of author prominent in-text referencing. Now, as the name implies, we are giving prominence to the author by highlighting the author in a sentence, by including the author's name in the sentence. In this case, it is Candio et al. Et al in Latin, it means and others. All right. So, and when I'm not going to go too much into these, and I don't expect you to remember all these. But when you go into the PDF, the APA 7th PDF document, you will see all these explained in the document. Et al in Latin means and others, and we use et al when we are referring to sources containing three authors or more. All right. So if we have any sources with three authors or more, we only need to include the last name of the first author, and then we replace everyone else with et al. All right. So in this case, it means Candio and others. And this is an example of author prominent because we are giving prominence by including the author in a sentence. So Candio et al. 2016 have studied different theoretical models for understanding reading comprehension. Now, this is different to the second sentence in red. Now, the second sentence is an example of what we call information prominent referencing. As the name implies, we are giving prominence to the information by highlighting what was written, not who wrote it. All right. So we are more interested in the information and less interested in the author, in who wrote it. So this is an example of information. So I beg your pardon, there's a typo there. It should be information prominent. All right. I'll change that before I send it to Ahmed. So it should be information prominent, the one in red. There's a typo. All right. So because we are giving prominence to the information, we are including all the in-text referencing details, meaning the author's last name and the year within brackets at the end of the sentence. All right. Now, I know this could be confusing to some about the difference between these two. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Now, let me reiterate, these are the two ways in which you can do in-text referencing: author prominent and information prominent. As the name implies, with author prominent, you are giving prominence to the author. So you include the author's name in the sentence. If you do that, you have the author's name, last name, and within bracket, the year of publication. Now, if you want to give prominence to the information instead of the author, then you do not include the author's name in the sentence, but you do that within brackets at the end of the sentence. Now, you don't have to choose one way or the other in your writing. It's best to mix them in your writing. All right. So make sure that you have both types of in-text referencing in your writing. Don't stick to one or the other only. All right. Have both types in your writing. So that's in-text referencing. Now, next slide, please. Now, another critical aspect of in-text referencing to bring to attention is primary versus secondary citation. Now, this is a bit challenging to wrap a head around, but I'm going to try my best to explain to you. All right. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And I encourage you to, after this session, please go back to my slide deck and go through this example again in your own time. Okay. Now, what do I mean by primary and what do I mean by secondary citation? Now, let's focus on the example on the left-hand side. Now, let's say I've read this article about reading comprehension by Candio, McMaster, and Christ, and I want to include it in my writing. Now, because I've actually read this article, all right? So this is what I call primary citation. It's primary because I have accessed it, I've read it, all right? and I am going to cite it in my writing. So this is what is known as primary citation. And at the bottom, that is what I have written. All right. So that is primary. Now let's look at the example on the right-hand side, the secondary citation. Now, in the same article written by Candio, McMaster, and Christ, they have referred to something written by Perfetti and Satsura about reading complexity. Now, I have run out of time. I don't have the time to look for this article written by Perfetti and Safura. So I'm going to rely on what is written in this article. All right. And that's what I have written at the end on the right hand side. Now, this is known as secondary citation. Now, what I have cited, according to Perfetti and Satsura, this is considered secondary because I did not read it. I'm relying on what was written in the primary citation written by Candio. So that's why it's called secondary. So that is the difference between primary and secondary. Now, you are encouraged to always read and cite your primary sources. But sometimes you might run out of time. Sometimes you cannot find all the articles or sources mentioned in the primary, and you do have to rely on what has been cited in the primary, and then that becomes your secondary citation. All right. So this is the main difference between primary and secondary. Yes, Reem, I totally agree with you. It can be very confusing. Remember, primary is what you actually read. All right. Primary is what you have read and what you are going to cite. Secondary is what is contained within the primary. All right. Secondary is what is contained within the primary, but you haven't accessed. You are relying on what's in the primary citation. That's the difference between the two. I'm afraid I will have to move on now to the next few slides. So over the next few slides, I'm going to show you examples of in-text citation and references using the common types of sources that you are likely to come across. Now, the first type is of sources that you're likely to use. These are books. All right. Now, this is an example of a book written by Kamal Uddin, Understanding English Language Teaching in EFL Context from Idea to Practicality. It was published in 2023. Next slide, please. And now with a book, whether you have referred to only one sentence in the book or one page or multiple pages, you are going to refer to the entire book in your in-text reference as well as a reference list. Now, in this case, there's only one author and his last name is Din. So this is what we do with information prominent and author prominent in-text referencing with the last name and then year of publication. And then at the end, this is how you record a book in your reference list. You start with the last name and then followed by the initials of the first name and middle name, if any, then the year of publication, followed by the title of the book in italics, then the publisher, which in this case is Routledge. Now, you will see at the end doi.org. Now, this is what we call the DOI. You will include that if available. Now, in case if you don't know what DOI is, now DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. All right, I'm going to put it quickly in the chat because I've not included that in my slide. Digital Object Identifier. Now, so that's DOI. Now, it is a unique way of identifying a publication. So these commonly applies to journal articles, but in recent times in books as well. So every publication is given a unique string of digits. All right. Now, this is unlike a website address which could change over time. But with DOI, it is consistent over time. That is why it is called a unique digital object identifier. And if it's available, you have to include that in your reference list. All right. So this is what we do when it comes to referencing a book. Now, next slide, please. Now, this is also a book, but it is different from the previous example. In the previous example, the entire book was written by one author, Kamal Uddin. All right. Now, this is an edited book. How do I know that? The telltale sign is actually on the cover because it says edited by, all right, Christian Ludger. Now, next slide, please. Now, with an edited book, it consists of a number of chapters, and each chapter is written by a different author. Unlike the previous example, as I mentioned, everything, all the chapters, every single word um, is written by one author. In this case, in an edited book, every chapter is written by a different person and is been put together by the editor and compiled into a book. Now, with an edited book, if you are referring to only one of the chapters in your writing, you will only refer to that chapter, all right, not the entire book. So, for instance, if I'm going to refer to only chapter 1, all right, the changing dynamics of online education, if that is what I'm referring to in my writing, then next slide, please. This is what I'm going to do in my in-text referencing and my reference list. Chapter 1 is written by Cobb and Calensis, all right? And so this is what I do in my in-text referencing, and then that's what I do in my reference list. I start with the authors of the chapter, then followed by the year, title of that chapter, followed by the editor and the title of the book, and then very important, the page range of that chapter, all right, followed by the publisher. So this is what I do with an edited book. Now, next slide, please. Now, the next slide is an example of a journal article. Again, this is a very common type of academic sources that you are likely to use in your writing. So in this article, it's written by 3 authors, Miao, Kang, and Meng. Now, as I mentioned before, if you have 3 authors or more in your referencing, you only need to include the first author and replace the rest with et al., which means and others. Now, next slide, please. So this is what you do when it comes to in-text referencing, and then this is how you refer to it in your reference list. Now, there is a difference between how you do in-text and how you do reference list when it comes to 3 authors or more. In your in-text, only the first author, and you replace the rest with et al. But when it comes to the reference list, just to make it more difficult for you, you have to spell all the names out. So if you have 20 names, you have to put all the names down. All right. So all the authors followed by the year, and then because this is a journal article, you need to put down the title of the article, followed by the name of the journal, then the volume number, issue number, and a page range of the article, and then the DOI of the article. So that is what you do with journal article. Next slide, please. Now, I will quickly go through these examples with you on how to include tables and figures in your writing. Now, it may not be common to some, but sometimes we may choose to include critical data, all right, in your writing. It could be tables or it could be pictures. Now, anything that has columns and rows like this, we call them tables. Everything else are referred to as figures. So how do I include tables in my writing? So I will need to number it. So in this case, this is the first table in my writing. I will call it table 1. Then I will need to give this table a title. All right. And then followed by the actual table. Underneath that, I must start with note. And then if the table has been lifted exactly as it is from the source, then it will be from then the details of the reference. All right. Now, if you have made changes to the table, if you have either rearranged or if you have taken out some information, if you have adapted it, then instead of from, you will need to say adapted from. All right. Again, I don't expect you to memorize and remember all these. I just want to highlight to you what to do if you choose to include tables. If you refer to the PDF document that I'm going to share with you, all the information is there. Now, next slide, please. So that was tables. Now this is figures. So as I mentioned before, anything with rows and columns, they are tables. Everything else, they are known as figures. All right. So this is an example of a figure similar to what you do with tables. I need to number them. All right. So this is figure 1 followed by the name of this figure. Then this is the actual figure. And then note from and then followed by the reference of where I've got this from. Okay, next slide, please. So this is an example of a reference list. Now, these are the 3 articles or 3 sources that we have used throughout this presentation. So the first one is the journal article, the second one is the book, and then, sorry, I beg your pardon. The first one is a chapter from the edited book. The second one is a book, and then the last one is a journal article. And this is how you arrange your reference items, all right, in alphabetical order. So Cope, which is C, followed by Din, and then followed by Meow, M, all right? Now, you do not arrange your reference items in a chronological manner. You don't arrange them from year to the earliest to the latest. You arrange them in alphabetical manner, all right, from A to Z. Please take note of that, all right? What else is there? What's the difference between work site and reference as concept? Rim, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, work site and reference as concept. Feel free to unmute to elaborate on your question, or if you want to clarify that in the chat, let me know. The next slide, please, Gemma.
I think, sorry to interrupt, Joseph. I think, Reem, you mean works cited and references, probably, right? The works cited and references, the concept and the difference between works cited and references. Because I'll give I'll give you, Gemma and Joseph, some context, probably because some of our students are sometimes encouraged to. All right, I see what you mean, Reem. So some of our students are encouraged to go and read and elaborate on the topic, and sometimes they provide a list of the works cited, which are the references they consulted, but not necessarily they cited within their
Okay.
text.
Yeah. So yeah, I get what you mean now, Ahmed. Thanks for the clarification. Now, it's something that I actually included on an earlier slide, but I did not elaborate on that. Now, that's what we call a bibliography, all right? And that's exactly what Reem, you were referring to as work cited. Now, there's a difference between a bibliography and a reference list. If you remember, I've mentioned it more than once. With a reference list, you must include the exact number of sources that you have cited in the body of a writing. So if I have included 10 different sources in my essay or report, I expect to see 10 sources in your reference list. All right, that is a reference list. Now, a bibliography or works cited is different because you could include more. All right. So let me give you an example. If you have been asked to write about a company, I'm just going to give you a very easy example. If you have been asked to write about a company and you have um, read about the history of the company, all right, but you are not going to cite it in your writing. So if you are asked to provide a bibliography or work cited, then you could include what you have read about the history. But if you have been asked to include only the reference list, then you wouldn't include anything that you have read but not cited. So I hope that has clarified um, the question. And so, Jude, you have raised your hand.
Yes, I do. I have a couple of questions. The first is like, if I want to reference a video, how do I do that?
Okay, so if you want to reference a video and there is an example given in a PDF and you can refer to that. So if you want to refer to a video, now very commonly we access videos these days on YouTube. All right.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a YouTube video, for example, you will need to again. Now, it's actually quite formulaic. You always follow a formula when you're referencing. It's always you always start with the author followed by the year of publication. All right. Now, if you know the author, the person who actually produced the video, then you will need to provide the name of the producer of the video. Now, if it's an organization, if it's a company or an organization that produce a video, then it is a name of the company or organization that is the author. All right, followed by the year, and then the title of this video, and then you followed by YouTube. All right, or wherever you got the video from. If you got the video from YouTube, then you need to say YouTube. If you got the video from a website, for example, then you will need to put down the name of the website. All right, and then followed by the URL. So this is what you will need to include. And then with in-text referencing, again, it is the same thing. Remember the two elements, last name and the year. Last name and the year. That's all you need to do, regardless of the type of sources, whether it's a video, article, book, but the differences are in the reference list. So I hope that has answered the question, so Jude.
Yeah, it did. So I have another question. Why do they like use different styles? Like, why don't they just stick to one style, all schools?
Why are there different
That
referencing
is an
styles?
excellent question.
If I've understood you correctly, so you're asking why are there so many different referencing styles?
Why? That is my question, yeah.
Now, I look, look, I don't have the answer. I do acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of different referencing styles. Now, I mean, I think part of me thinks that it's the ego. It's probably the ego of some publications or is the ego of some disciplines, who think that they know best or who think that their way is the best way to do things. All right. For example, a discipline might choose to use APA, another discipline or another journal might choose to use Harvard. All right.
Yeah.
And because they think that that is the best way to do things. All right. So unfortunately, there are all these different ways to reference. But I guess to make it easier for you, you have been asked to stick to APA 7, all right? And then so that you can disregard everything else.
Yeah. Mentioning APA 7th, I do have another question if you don't mind. Like, they upgraded the 7th version to the 8th. Like, why don't they just use the 8th then? Why do they still use the 7th?
Okay, now I believe that when new editions come out, it may not be adopted. And feel free to jump in, Gemma and Ahmed. You might know more about this than I do. Now,
Mhm.
when a new edition comes out, not all libraries will jump on board immediately because they need to upgrade or improve or make changes to all the resources they have. So until they have they're able to or they have the capacity to update all the resources to the latest edition, otherwise they will keep to the previous edition.
So is it okay to use the 8th instead of
Now,
the 7th?
if you have been asked to use the seventh edition, then I would stick to the seventh edition. All right.
Okay.
Um, don't make it difficult for yourself.
Okay. Thank
If
you. Thank you so much.
if you are familiar with the seventh edition, if your teacher has asked you to do this to use the seventh edition, then I'll just stick to the seventh edition, and not follow the latest edition.
Yeah, got it.
I
Thank you.
agree. I agree, Joseph. And I think, Sujud, if you don't mind, Joseph, the
Please.
most important thing here is to be consistent
Mm.
throughout. Once you decide to go with APA 7th, you need to be consistent and use it throughout. Don't just jump the gun and use 8 or 7 different parts of the paper. That's the most
Yeah,
important, I think.
got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
We have a question from Reem. Can we use APA for literature or only MLA? Now, sorry, Reem, I'm not sure what you mean by MLA. Is that I'm not familiar with that acronym or
I think MLA is another
It's
referencing
another
style.
referencing style, similar to Harvard style, but I think, Reem, it depends on your institution. I think some institutions, for example, IUG in Gaza, may ask you to follow MLA or Harvard, or even if APA. If they ask you to follow MLA or Harvard or Chicago style, just go with that style. I mean, and I'm sure the institution would provide you with a guideline template or PDF file that shows you the instruction. So it wouldn't
Yep.
it wouldn't be a problem if you follow that style. The most important thing here is to know and check with your institution what citation style they follow, and
Yep.
use that.
Exactly. Now, thanks for that. Now, as long as you understand the basics of referencing and citation, you find that they're all very similar, all right? And there are only very small differences like comma and full stop, all right? But the essential elements are there, all right? When it comes to in-text referencing, it's last name and the year of publication, all right? In some referencing styles, there's no comma between the two. In some referencing styles, there's a comma between the two. And then in your reference list, there are different ways of arranging them and so on and so forth. But if you understand the basics of referencing, they are largely similar. Okay. Now, I have shared with you some free referencing software. Now, personally, I do not use a referencing software because I prefer to do it myself manually. I'm very old school like that, because I like to be in control. Because my experience with referencing software is they do make mistakes. All right. Um, and unless you know the basics of referencing, if you rely only on the software, you will not be able to identify any mistakes made by this software. All right. So if you are new to referencing, I would encourage you to do it manually. All right. After you're familiar with referencing, then by all means, if you want to make it easier for yourself, use a referencing software, because it is quicker. All right. Admittedly, it is quicker, but it is capable of making mistakes. Next slide, please. Now, I'm conscious of the time. I only have 1 minute left. I've prepared two activities for you. Activity one is a website because I have recognized that I have not given you websites as example but I'm sure that you will come across a lot of online resources. So I want you to be familiar as well with referencing web pages. All right. So this is an example of a website. It's actually your university website. And so this is a web page. I want you to think about how to reference this. All right. I've provided you with a clue. You will use the author, full stop, date within brackets, title of the web page, and the URL. And I've given you the URL there. So please do this in your own time. I've given you the answer on the next slide, but please do not check the answer until you have done that. Gemma, could you please quickly skip to the yep, okay.
Yep.
Is second.
I skipped by the answer.
Thank you for skipping the answer. Now, this is the second activity. I would like you to think about how to summarize, all right, these two paragraphs into one sentence to tell us the history of your university from 1955 to 2001 in one sentence, all right? Summarize these two paragraphs, and then obviously you will need to include in-text referencing, all right? So, and the answer is or a suggested answer, I should say, is provided on the next slide. Now, your summary might be different, but I'll be interested to know, how you have used either information prominent or author prominent. All right. Skip the answer, please, Gemma, and move to the. Yep. Okay. So as promised, this is a slide with all the resources that hopefully are useful to you. And after I've corrected the typo, I will send this slide deck to Ahmed, and then he can share with you. So that is a link to the APA 7 PDF. And then I've got 4 other links there on how to avoid plagiarism, on paraphrasing synthesis, and then linking your ideas effectively. All right. That's all we have. I am sorry for taking up so much of your time. I think we have gone way over time. If you have any questions before I let you go or before I go to bed.
There were quite a few people in the comments asking for links to APA, and so for those people who asked in the comments, I did say that we'd have the resources at the end of the presentation. So we'll share those with you, but if you'd like a copy of the PDF, and I'm sure we could send that to you via email.
Yeah, I can share those in the group, and it's accessible, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, may I ask a question, please?
Sure, yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Jimas. Thank you, Joseph and Dr. Ahmad. Please, really, it is an interesting and amazing session, but it occurred to my mind that paraphrasing, synthesis, and references is a challenging so as to keep cohesion and coherence. But what occurs to me is the question, may you give some advice to students and to authors across the world to avoid, why? Because some of them misuse AI and they cut and paste and go to the Grammarly and they remove, for example, plagiarism. And even BA or MLA, all the styles can be arranged, organized by what? By the AI.
That is a very interesting comment, and I know AI is something that all institutions and educators across the world are thinking about. I have two things to say. One would be with your own use of I think a really important thing to do as a student is to think about, when are you using AI as a tool that helps you with your learning, and when are you using AI to actually do the thinking for you? So if you are using it as a tool and it's benefiting your learning, then it may be appropriate. If that's appropriate for your institution, you also need to check what's appropriate for your institution. But if you're over relying on it, then you're not actually doing the learning. And I think, we all know when we're using something as a tool, we're over reliant on it. The other thing I would say is if people are using AI, and like Joseph made with this comment with the software, it can be wrong. It can be inaccurate. You can't presume that it has the right information. So if you are using it, it's really important that you're using your own evaluative judgment, um, and checking that what it is saying is correct, checking that it is saying what you want it to say. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what your institution's position is on the use of AI. I know it's very controversial. I hope that's helpful in thinking about how we use this technology in the coming years.
Yes, thank you for that, for answering the question. But really, I come across some articles. Sometimes I feel that it is a matter of just narrating why they just quote and go directly to the GBA and artificial intelligence, and then they ask for what for paraphrasing. Why? Because paraphrasing, sometimes I feel that some authors do not give a meaning, a sense of the meaning. You don't feel that it is a scientific research, just narrating. That's what it occurred to me. Thank you for that.
Is it Yahai? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. It sounds like you're really critically engaging with the technology, which is really important. I think, like all technology, it can do interesting things, but it also can be problematic. So if you're asking really critical questions about the way you're using it, about the way other people are using it, then I think you're on the right track in having a really considered response to how you use that. But I mean, as an educator, for me and for my institution, and I'm sure Joseph feels the same way, we are still grappling with how to manage this technology, how to teach students to use it appropriately, thinking about what impact it has on learning. I'm probably a bit old-fashioned, old school, and I think you should probably just try and do the work yourself and really be very careful about how you use AI in your work. But yeah, that is that but maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned in the way that I think about it.
Thank you for really just the last question, please. Uh, is AI controllable? Can we control that, or
Can we control AI?
yeah, is that possible?
Well, I mean, you can control your own use of it in your own work. Um, Beyond that,
Yes.
beyond that, it's probably, well, that's definitely kind of problematic. I would probably suggest that no, we can't necessarily control the way that other people use it or companies use it. But I think it's really important that we ask questions about the way people are using it and the ethics behind the way they use it. But I guess really in terms of, can you control? I mean, you can control your own use of it. Beyond that, I don't know. Yeah, hey, look, it's a huge area.
Yes,
I
you're
don't
right.
know if Ahmed and Joseph have any comments on AI, but it's a huge area. Keep asking questions, I think would be my advice about how it's being used, how you can use it, and how it's benefiting learning, and if it's
Mm.
benefiting learning.
Yes,
I,
thank you. I do appreciate.
Mm.
I agree with what Gemma was saying about the fact that you can control how you use AI in terms of, for example, the prompts that you use, to generate information by using Gen AI. However, you cannot control what Gen AI is telling you because Gen AI is harnessing you know any information that's out there, and information that's out there is beyond our control. So we cannot control what Gen AI is telling us, but we can control how we want Gen AI to present information to us and what information. Although we cannot know for sure if the information is correct, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Which is why it is even more important for you to know your stuff, for you to understand and know your stuff, because then you are in a good position to judge whether AI is telling you something that is accurate or whether something it is making up. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gemma and Joseph. I think I agree here. I mean, the other day we had a session on academic voice, human voice, and AI voice, and we talked about the difference between AI voice and how students um, could um, could use their voice and human voice in their writing, and how this is different from AI voice. I mean, Dr. Yahya was talking about narrating by AI. I mean, he means yapping and that parroting style of AI. I mean, whenever you read a text that is written by AI, it feels parroting. It feels yapping. It feels like just putting text on paper or on the page. I mean, we've been telling our students about this and the danger this may cause to critical thinking and cognitive processing, etc. And I recall a paper by MIT recently about the negative impact of heavily depending on AI and Gen AI in writing and in tasks, daily tasks, and how it impacts the cognitive skills and capacities of a human being negatively, really. And this, the cells of the brain get impacted by the heavy use of AI. So, Dr. has asked if we can control the use. I believe he was referring to how students use it. I mean, we can just advise students about how to use it and give them practical strategies on how to use it, but not to allow GAI to replace their voice and to replace their role as learners. Because at the end of the day, you are learning and you want to acquire knowledge. You don't want AI to replace your abilities and your knowledge. So it's all about raising awareness of how to use it and how to be careful about its negative impacts.
Yeah, thank you.
Gemma, I just wanted, before we wrap up, I just wanted to thank you, Gemma and Joseph, for the really interesting workshop. I mean, honestly, I've taught academic writing on different occasions, but when it comes to paraphrasing, referencing, I always found it really rigid and abstract, but your session and your workshop made it really practical and interesting. And it felt like it went too fast. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. And also, I like your way of how you labeled, Gemma, how you labeled those key points or key words and key ideas in the paragraph with different colors, and how you moved from that visual map into probably a map that created the paraphrase text. And I think when we train our students on translation and interpreting, we give them that like similar strategies of how to move to take some ideas in order to interpret the text. And Joseph, thank you so much for those practical examples of references and how to reference different types of resources. I really appreciate the practicality and the smoothness of the session. And guys, if you have any comments, any questions before we call it a day, please feel free to send your question. Yes, Ragad, please. You can unmute your microphone and ask your question. Ragad?
Right, sir. But I would like to make sure that I'm audible for you.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
All right. First off, to thank you so much for such time and efforts. It was lovely to be up here. I actually like to share a little hump I'm really trying to overcome these days. I really find it challenging for me to limit my writing to a specific length. Like a few days ago, our doctor in writing subject asked us to write a paragraph to tell about an experience in our life, and it's limited into like 15 lines. So I have so many details, I have so many thoughts I would like to consider, I would like to mention. So in this context, as you mentioned about paraphrasing, like I have a question. So related to that, how do you decide when a paraphrase is enough versus when a direct quote is necessary? So I would like to know about this one.
So Ragad, if I understand your question, you're saying that you often have a lot of different ideas, lots of different things you want to say, but you may only have like a short kind of amount, like a limited word limit to express
Exactly.
those ideas.
Yeah,
So your question is like, how do I get my ideas down to a paragraph? Is that
exactly. Yeah,
so?
because I really find it difficult to shorten, to condense my ideas. And I think the same thing in paraphrasing, you understand?
Yeah. So, okay, what one strategy I would probably suggest is think about the question that you are answering with your piece of writing. So before, for example, I gave you the scenario of here is the essay. Here is the essay that I want you to imagine that you're writing. So if you have a question in mind when you're doing your paraphrasing or when you're planning your writing, what you can do is think, okay, well, I'm answering this particular question. So how do I prioritize the information that I want to write about? And that may mean that that you don't get to write about everything that you find interesting. It may mean that you have to select, but you select on the criteria of thinking about what is the answer? What is the question I'm responding to? Does that make sense?
It is actually, it is convincing, yeah.
Yeah. So think about what's the question that I need to answer? What's the information I have, or what are the ideas that I have? And how do I prioritize those ideas to directly answer that question? And it may mean that you don't get to write about everything that you want to or you find interesting, but you have to be ruthless and selective sometimes to get to those word counts. I don't know if Joseph or Ahmed want to add anything to that. Any suggestions?
I kind of agree more. It's about like what Gemma was saying is about answering the question and addressing the criteria. It's also about being critical. Because you need to decide, okay, so this is a question and these are all the possible answers or all the possible scenarios. So I need to then look at this with a critical lens to see, which ones are most credible, which ones are the best solutions. For example, in regard to the question, in regard to the criteria, and then as Gemma was saying, I will need to prioritize them. So you can't possibly include everything, and you will need to then critically select and justify your choices.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I mean, if I may add something here, Ragad, also remember, you were talking about the writing for like a particular course. When you are asked to write within time word limit, for example, write a paragraph of 100 words, and you feel that you have so many ideas to write about, but then you don't know what to prioritize. And this is something different from paraphrasing. It's about producing text. It's about writing. I think the same idea applies here, that you need to prioritize what is key, what is important. And remember the difference in terms of rhetoric, the Arabic rhetoric and the English rhetoric, and how we approach rhetoric differently. In Arabic, we tend to repeat things, and this is part of our rhetoric in Arabic. Arabic is repetitive, and we believe that the more we repeat things, we emphasize them, we give them importance. In English, it's totally different. If you repeat things for no reason, it becomes awkward, and it reads awkward. So keep this in mind, Ragad, that ask yourself, have I conveyed the idea that I wanted in probably the fewest words that I could? That's fine. One long sentence can be shortened in a few words. It conveys the same meaning. Yes, go for shorter sentences. Don't repeat ideas. Don't repeat the same probably phrases or keywords. Just stick to the point and go linear. In classes, we talked to our students about the differences in rhetoric and how the Arabic rhetoric tends to be like moves in circles, but the English rhetoric is straight line to the point. So remember the straight line and to the point in the shortest words possible. Thank you, Ravi.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's so interesting.
New today.
We've learned something too.
There's a popular rhetoric approach by Kaplan, 1965, and it's really interesting paper. I can share it with you, everyone. It talks about the differences between cultures in terms of rhetoric and how people from different cultures approach writing and approach rhetorical styles. Russian, for example, Chinese or English, Arabs, Middle Eastern cultures. A squirrel, like circles and lines, or zigzag, moving in zigzag. Really interesting. I can share that paper with you.
Yeah. And if I may add a comment,
Sure.
There's no way that is better or worse than the other. There's no way that's more superior or more inferior. It's a matter of who you're writing for. It's a matter of who your audience is.
Exactly.
And the purpose of writing. So, don't think that, this way is better than the other. No, they're all good. They're all different ways of expressing things.
Absolutely. And it's part of identity. It's part of culture. It's part of who people are. But I mean, as you said, it's about readership. If your readership is the English speaking word, then the best way to approach that and to be convincing, informative in your writing, you need to understand their ways of writing, their ways of rhetoric and expression. So I agree with you, Joseph. Yeah, that's a good point. Any final question, comment, suggestion before we wrap up? I know that you are using smartphones and probably charge devices, which may run out of batteries very soon. But I don't want to hold you longer. But it's really interesting. I mean, we and I know it's late time for you, Joseph and Gemma. We don't want to hold you longer. It's almost 10 p.m. out there, so we should say really good night and thank you so much for the time, Joseph and Gemma. We really appreciate it, and we would love to have you maybe in the next year, in the new year, and we have you in another chance. We'd really appreciate it if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving us to spend time with you.
Thank you so much.
Lovely to spend time with you. Lovely to spend time with you.
The same here. Thank you so much.
See you again in the new year.
Yep.
Thank you so much and have a good night. See you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good afternoon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.